Chapter 12 Jean to Jacques, 69. The contrast of the trees within the small canyon she was in was intriguing. The birch, lark, and hemlock were remarkably tall and as straight as arrows, bare trunk for 30 feet from the ground, but thick with seasonal greenery at the tops. The junipers and mimosa were bent and twisted, some growing out from the side walls of the canyon, creating hidden hollows and winding trails that led through and across the fertile woodland hills. There were other dwarf shrubs that Jasmine had never seen before along the path, with fat, flat, stubby dark green needles and long fragrant yellow cones, often housing an array of woodland birds and playful chipmunks. The sky sled had run out of fuel hours ago, so Jasmine had gone on by foot, with Vinny riding noisily upon her shoulder. The ground was soft as a cushion beneath her feet, a mixture of earth and peat moss, creating a most comfortable earthen carpet, which made the long walk much easier for her to bear than where she had recently traversed. The air was cool and refreshing, and the scents ranged from the fragrant mimosa blooms and juniper to occasional honeysuckle and sweet pine. "What was it that the old wizard told you to say?" Vinny asked. "In peace I enter, Jean to Jacques," she answered for the third time that hour. Please don't ask me again." The crow squawked, somewhat offended. "I just want to make sure you don't forget," he said. "What is this SZAN anyway? It's a crazy bunch of words." "That's exactly what Devlin said," she said, faintly smiling. She missed the old man dearly. "The secret name of the cave, I suppose, Vinny." "Maybe they're magic words." "Maybe they are." There was such a strange comfort here, something Jasmine had not felt since the day before she left Mead. The scenic canyon was not deep, but it made her feel oddly secure. Beyond the trees, she saw the red-gray rock walls on both sides of her, keeping her course steadily eastward. After a long, gradual slope down a hillside, her path crossed a featureless, dry creek bed, one of many she had crossed that day. The incline on the next rise was not steep, but the strange comfort she had been experiencing began to falter as she climbed the hill, and so she stopped at the crest, questioning her course. "What's wrong? Why'd you stop?" Vinny asked. This isn't right," she answered. This isn't the right way. We gotta go back." "Are you sure?" he asked, his head spinning. "I can feel it. We passed it." Jasmine headed back down into the ravine and paused at the dry creek bed at the bottom. "Here," she replied. "We leave the path and go downstream from here. We follow this trail." "Are you sure you're sure?" "I'm sure." She left the footpath and followed the course of the dry creek bed, her feet crunching the fragile black, red, and blue shale with every step. There were ferns and mushrooms sprouting from the trees and stumps on both sides of her. Moss-covered rocks and pools, filled with minnows and fat tadpoles, made the path before her zigzag. "Are you sure you know where you're going?" the crow asked. "Oh, never mind. I'm just along for the ride." "This is the right direction," she confirmed. "I know it is." She wandered similar to the paths that had led her to that magic sinkhole mirror in the apple orchard. Was the path that she was on and unavailable to everyone and everything else but her? As miles passed behind her, the forest grew deeper, darker, much older, and more mysterious. The trees were very old, dark, and protective. Their strong, heavy roots grew long and twisted. Mushrooms were everywhere. From the trees, red ones grew in layers, stacked like cupboard shelves. From dead fallen logs, orange and white spiraled mushrooms shot up like miniature castles with numerous freckled towers. The long-stemmed ferns covered the shaded hillsides between the mossy stones and fallen logs. Here and there, fat toads of various sizes and colors passively sat on the tops of rocks and stumps, curiously watching her pass them by. their throats ballooning with croaking song. Jasmine saw an old howl hooting from his doorstep, way up in a hollow tree. The crickets were as loud as they usually were at night, almost as if they were trying to compete with the noisy green and brown spotted frogs that croaked from the banks of the shallow pools she passed. Strange songbirds topped it all off, orating melodiously from the topmost branches of the old willow trees. Animal songs, she was thinking. Maybe you should check things out again, Vinny, Jasmine suggested. Whatever, he croaked, flapping his wings. Do this, Vinny, do that, Vinny. He launched from her shoulder, fluttering up through the trees. Jasmine saw him circling through the distant forest, then disappearing. A few minutes later, he returned with a swishing flutter. As I expected, nothing as far as I can see but treetops and sky. Good, Jasmine replied, holding the key in her pocket tight within her fist. We'll keep following this creek bed southeast, keeping a mile or so from those foothills. If you say so, you're the boss, boss. The rough path was pleasant and easy enough to follow. Raspberries grew abundantly, but most of them were still flowering and weren't quite ripe enough to eat yet. Jasmine's stomach rumbled. It had been a long time since she had a decent meal. She wondered when she would sit down at a full table again. One of Drer's breakfasts sounded awfully good. Benny, can I ask you something? She said in a shy, inquisitive tone as she bounded from stone to stone over a pool, trying to keep her feet dry. If there's no... Do you remember the one traveling with us named Gabriel? The bird hopped from one shoulder to the other. Sure, he said, then finished with, no, not really. The tall, handsome one? The wizard? He inquired. Did have a beautiful beard thing. No, she said, the younger one with dark hair and green eyes. Oh, yes, him. Sure, Vinny said. He frightened me. Frightened you how? Well, all Thordians frighten me. I'm a bird and they're cats, Vinny piped. Big cats. I thought he was going to eat me at any second. But you're right, he was handsome. That was Pythagoras, she said, frustrated. I mean the human, the prince. Never mind. Obviously you have no taste. Vinny squawked. I beg your pardon, your highness, he said, rebuking her. But indeed I do have good taste. In fact, to prove it, there's some wild strawberries just ahead and some breadfruit next to that, and a spring with fresh water to wash it all down. I can tell you one thing, that tastes good. I am hungry, she said. Let's have some. Jasmine knelt near the spring, picking 2 full handfuls of large, juicy strawberries with one ambitious grasp. Vinny perched among the berries, pecking diligently at one particularly large one. The breadfruit was ripe, and the water was remarkably refreshing. They ate until they could eat no more. So, what is it? Vinny finally asked her. You love this wingless Gabriel man? Jasmine looked at the crow and nearly blushed. She shrugged. I don't know. Maybe. Is it that obvious? The crow cocked his head. I can't say for sure, he said. I was only guessing since you brought it up, but wouldn't say why. Oh, she said, reflecting and analyzing herself. Well, that and the way you look at him all the time. Oh! It's all right if you do. I mean, it happens to all of us. I've been in love a time or two myself. Have you? Well, he trilled modestly. To be honest with you, actually about 27 times, but who's counting, right? Jasmine smiled at her little shiny feathered friend. You're certainly a free spirit, Vinny. I didn't realize you were so prolific with the ladies. Are you saying that there are other intelligent talking crows out there somewhere? Other intelligent talking crows? Ha! I'm the dimmest one you'll probably ever come across, he told her. The rest are too smart to let themselves be known to your people. I come from a long line of great birds from the great reaches of Eof. The Anulura, we are known. I am surprised if you have never heard of us. Renowned we are in the world of the wise. I myself am a great Anularian chieftain. He looked at her sidelong to see if she was falling for his fame. Well, come on, let's go, Chief, she said with a chuckle. I don't want to get caught dawdling here in a berry patch. 70. Jasmine strolled the afternoon away with hardly a negative thought. The peaceful woods had absorbed her, easing her into a state of tranquility, and she felt as if no harm could possibly befall her there. Sometimes the pull of the stone was strong. Sometimes she could feel nothing of it at all. She knew the direction and remained steadfast. Evening was now upon them. The sky was red and gold beyond the fissure of the valley, the billowy clouds silver blue along the dark eastern fringes of arriving twilight. As evening drew on, she thought a lot about the rest of the crew. She was all alone again. The crew was gone, each relinquished off to the shifting, tussling hands of fate. I hope they're all right, she said aloud. Vinny had been dozing. Well, what? He stuttered, wings flapping. Oh, yeah, sure they are. Don't worry about them. A moment later, who? And then he dozed off again. She thought about poor Lake, lost in the desert, and brave Percy, who had volunteered to go back after him. That desert had looked so uninviting and deadly. She thought about King Tytel Bantu and wondered how he was faring far away in Tugulin, without Binder and Dreher there at his side. She thought fondly of her Median home and her many friends there, how anxious they must be to hear from her. Had the Garnians reached that fair island yet? She feared so, but hoped not. And where was that Habad? She shivered at the thought of that devious, soulless assassin. She was nearly sure that she was not done with him yet. Her heart went out to Cadizat and to his family. She had made a vow to him that she meant to someday fulfill, but somehow she felt as though they would never cross paths again. Not in this lifetime, anyway. Dedlin Dane had certainly proved his worth, she thought, smiling, and so had the others, brave and true. Dreher always cleaning and cooking without complaint. Steadfast Binder and his whining and overprotectiveness. Percy's cool-headedness and masterful navigational skills. Ott's sixth sense when he came to sniffing out Garnians. Even Lake and Cran, who had been pulled up by their roots and drug off across the continent, had proven themselves courageous and pure of heart. She would never forget any of them. But mostly, she thought of Gabriel. She longed for him to be there, strolling along with her at her side, talking, laughing, and making sure she was always okay. She hoped more than anything that he was okay himself, and that he was on his way, even then, searching diligently for her, coming quickly to guide and protect her against whatever dangers still lie ahead. That was her one wish, but that possibility seemed unlikely to her now. Her instincts told her that if Gabriel were indeed still alive, he was now far, even farther away. Will I ever see any of them again, Vinny? She asked. There was no response from the bird this time. He was fast asleep, with his beak tucked beneath a wing, bouncing with each step she took. The scenery of the forest changed very little with the passing miles, although a few small springs she passed along the way, trickling down into the creek bed, had caused a bit of a stream to run. There was a cool mist about her, cloaking the distant trees. Time felt as though it were standing still. She felt as though she had been walking there for days or weeks, and when she turned around to look behind her, it was as if the path and the trees had moved, magically and protectively covering her passing. Her feet began aching after many miles of hiking. I'm not sure what it can do or what I can do with it, she mumbled to herself about that stone. Darkness began to fall, and for once the coming night was comforting. It was like a warm, protective bed with a blanket to sleep within. The trees scattered up along the hillsides were small, yet dense and concealing. The limbs seemed to be intertwined and hugging, like long netted arms and fingers. As she stared at them through the mists, the trees resembled little old men with gray faces, bearded with brown, leafy whiskers, hiding her within their world with outstretched arms and holding the cruel outside world at bay. Colorful butterflies began dancing in the night songs, butterflies and fireflies playing about among the branches of the trees. Sometimes they would come at her, flying circles around her head like a halo of gold. 71. Vinny grunted, looking up with a start. We still lost? He mumbled, half asleep. I don't know, she admitted, ducking beneath a moss-covered log that crossed her path. And I don't really care. Isn't that odd? Then someone needs to say it. I say we're lost, he said. Look, I can't keep my eyes open any longer. Let's have us asleep for a bit. What do you say? I can't take any more of this bouncing about. We're safe enough here, aren't we? We can start again in the morning. You know, a fresh start and all that. I'm sleepy too, she said, yawning. It's hard for me to keep my eyes open as well. Strange. I hope we're not bewitched, Sir Crowbird. Well, we both need some sleep. I can't get any decent rest bobbing up and down on your shoulder all night. I'm nearly plummeted to my death twice. It's torture. Jasmine climbed up the bank to a flat ridge and found a seat in a soft bed of dry ferns and mosses. Vinny perched comfortably on a nearby limb, falling back into sleep at once. Good night, then, he mumbled. Never seen him so quiet, Jasmine said, watching the bird. She laid back and folded her arms to keep out the chill and watched the stars through the canopy above. They were especially bright that night, cold and twinkling, but friendly. She fell asleep. 72. Harsh, reddened eyes searched in all directions. A nasty dripping nose scoured the ground and trees for a scent. For some reason, the trail was dim and confusing, and the scent seemed faint and old, although the Morgothian dog knew it was fresh. It was this place, it was thinking. It was hiding her. That's what it was doing. The paths moved at will, as did the rocks and trees, guiding it away from her trail time and time again. It wanted to take a new shape, a shape with wings, to help speed it on its way. But that would take too long, and the trees would hide her from even more from above. There was no time for that. There was no more time for anything now but haste. Nonetheless, it had discovered the empty sky sled earlier and the half-eaten berries sometime later. She couldn't be too much further ahead. Night had come, and unlike the Morgothian, she would have to sleep. Night was the Morgoth's greatest ally. It dashed down the dry creek bed, crashing over bushes and small trees. It drooled in the anticipation of tasting her. One snap, a few seconds to relish her between its teeth and lapping tongue, then gobbling her down into the swelling rot of its belly, still alive, but barely. How delightfully tasteful she must be. How soft her young bones. The Garnians would then burn this whole infernal forest down, take it apart piece by piece. The stone was close by. Very close by. Yes, the Morgothian dog of Gil-Gahar could feel the stone now too, repelling it away, which made it an easy beacon to now seek out. 73. For no apparent reason, Jasmine Day awoke. The night sky was as black as pitch, for deep clouds now shrouded the stars. Vinny still slept soundly on his perch. She looked around for whatever it was that had awakened her, but she saw or heard nothing. There was just the forest blackness lit with playful fireflies dancing to the woodland concerto. Then one firefly brighter than all the others, came forward, dancing to and fro before her face. Jasmine noted immediately that the color of this firefly was different from the rest. It was bright pink instead of yellow. "Well, you're not a firefly at all," she exclaimed, bewildered. To her astonishment, there, before her eyes, was a beautiful, tiny, winged imp, a fairy maiden with dragonfly wings and a sparkling pink gown made of shimmering, sparkling light. She was very tiny and fragile, but so beautiful that she took Jasmine's breath away. The fairy beckoned Jasmine to follow her with a wave of her tiny hand. I'm being summoned," she said with a feeling of circumstance and obligation. "Vinny, come on." The bird did not flinch, as if Jasmine had not said anything at all. Jasmine quickly stood and followed the racing light. "Vinny, I gotta go or I can't keep up." "Vinny," she cried over her shoulder, running through the woods after the fairy. "Well, wait for me here then. I'll be back as soon as I can." The pixie weaved through the trees with ease, gliding as gracefully as a dancer on the night air. Jasmine crashed and stuttered through the underbrush, hopping from one small clearing to the next, high-stepping through impossible thickets in every effort to try and keep up. It was like she was running through a surrealistic dream. The pink light was joined by a delicate blue light, and then one of gold. They were all fairies, but these with butterfly wings and glowing antennae. Then came a green one and a lavender one with the slower flutter of iridescent moth wings, all beckoning for her to hurry faster. Jasmine followed the cluster of silent fairies with all her strength far into the thick of the woods, stumbling sometimes over roots and fallen logs, but never slowing for fear of getting left behind or lost in the wood. The trees began to thin a little, and the heavy underbrush eased. All 3 moons came out from behind wispy clouds, illuminating a tripod of focusing light onto a cool white path that fell before her feet. Jasmine ran on a bit faster, watching as the tiny fairy maidens flew further and further away into the distant trees ahead. "Don't speed up," she cried. "I'm following, I promise. Please, I can't keep up with you." She ran even faster, if that was even possible, almost blindly through the woods, up one hill, down another. "You're losing me. Wait." The magical lights moved further away, far beyond the farthest trees, until they disappeared completely from her view. Just like that, poof, they were gone. "Wait! Please, little fairy," she cried again. "Come back!" Jasmine slowed to a stumbling walk. She ran a few more steps, then stopped. What was the use? She was completely and utterly lost now, and she had no idea which way to go or which direction she had just come from. It had gotten very dark once more. There were no sounds in this part of the forest except for one single solitary cricket, seeming to serenade the lonely night all by itself, as lonely and forlorn as she now felt herself. She sighed, wondering what to do now. What had just happened? Was this some kind of trick? She tried hard to catch her breath. At least the air was cool and fragrant there, she was thinking, so sweet, so delicious. What was that aroma? She knew it. It was jasmine blossoms. The solitary cricket went as silent as the rest of the night. Jasmine took in her breath and held it. She felt an anticipatory tingle from the roots of her hair to the tips of her toes. I found it, she joyously exclaimed, her voice but a whisper. Just then, 1,000 beautiful lights of every magnificent color shone all around, so incredibly bright and vibrant that she could barely keep her eyes open. She was knee-deep in jasmine flowers, standing upon a small shelf on the bank of a magical pond that was surrounded on the other 3 sides by a rough rock wall, covered in old roots and vines. Thousands of illuminated fairies swirled all around her, and then they dove away across the water, their bright lights casting glorious reflections upon the still glistening surface. Somehow, Fountains burst from the pond, lit from beneath with magnificent lights and colors, and there was music in the air, magical music and natural singing beyond comparison. The voices of nature and magic had come to delight and warm Jasmine's weary, worn heart, like medicine for the soul. The sounds of harps and cymbals and the fanfare of brassy horns chased away all of her doubt and fear in whatever ways they were created in the wilderness. "It's the most beautiful and wondrous thing I've ever seen in my entire life," she said, tears rolling from her joy-filled eyes. A stone walkway rose from the depths of the spraying waters, presenting a path at her feet, leading across the blue-green pond of pink, aquamarine, and turquoise lights to a small architectural dome-shaped cave in the rocks on the opposite shore. The room there was lit from within with light from crystals as white and pure as the light from the suns. The entrance was covered with ivy plants and flowering ferns and trailing moss hanglets, which opened for her like a welcoming curtain. She had heard rumors of this place for years and had traveled so far to seek it out, but nothing had prepared her for the natural, pure splendor and regal greatness she witnessed. It was an absolute wonder for her to behold. Jasmine gathered her wits and stepped out upon the sturdy walkway. Curious golden fish lined the sides of the walkway as she crossed to the other side. Then other animals began appearing on the shores to watch, lining the banks of the pond. Deer, rabbits, a dragon snake, birds, a unicorn, squirrels, a fox and a badger, a wolverine and a bear, and many others. To her left, there were two animals she had never seen or heard of before, some kind of a canine boar dog with as many horns and long tusks, and a large arachnid of some kind with what looked like a human head with spider eyes and clicking mandibles. Both were as docile as the rest that had gathered there as witnesses of solace, and bowed reverently. The fairies crowned Jasmine with sparkling stardust and clothed her with a fiery robe. Even above the sound of thousands of buzzing wings and fairy voices, Jasmine could hear her own heart pounding in her ears. She stepped off the walkway into the cave. The walls were carved with statues of grim men and women looking down with a powerful and righteous, caring and comforting demeanor. There was a crystal pedestal in the center of the room, and there in its clutches was a small, nearly round stone the size of an apricot. The shone with magnificent fury and shimmering angelic brightness. "The stone," she whispered, stepping up before it. "The stone of her great, great, great grandfather, the first day." Jasmine reverently took the small stone key from her pocket and gently slid it within the small lock at the edge of the pedestal. It was a perfect, soundless fit. She swallowed. As she gently turned the key, she recited the magical incantation that Devlin Dane had instructed her. "In peace I enter, Jean to Jacques." The key tingled in her fingers like a warm flow of soft electricity. The four claws that held the stone in place for centuries opened slowly and gracefully with a click. Jasmine Day, one of the 5 heirs to the throne of Day, reached out and took it up in her trembling hand. She was instantly filled with white light and power, more intense than she was humanly capable of acknowledging. It took her breath away. All good-hearted people across the miles were instantly filled with a sense of determination and of courage and hope. All evil-biting men and creatures slithered quickly into shadows as feelings of fear, paranoia, and doom overcame them. Many Garnians went suddenly mad with confusion and began fighting amongst themselves. Even Lord Gilgahar the Ungodly, standing in his dark tower nearly a continent away, shrieked as his black heart froze and his right hand withered, permanently useless. And then suddenly, across the small pond, two red eyes suddenly knew the true meaning of absolute fear. The evil Morgoth of Gilgahar had arrived just minutes too late. It sensed its own doom and howled, desperately leaping across the pond toward the cave, mouth drawn open wide. Instantly, the howl became a pitiful squeal as it became as ash, empty and without form or substance. As a gentle wind took it, it fell powerlessly across the water and into the nearby woods to become soot of the shadow of the old guardian trees for the rest of eternity, some of it settling beneath the restraint of the roots of the tiny, fragile jasmine flowers that thrived around the cave at XAQ. Jasmine was unconcerned with any of these things. She watched the shining stone in her hand as its great light began to fade. She did not understand what she was to do with it now, or how to regain and retain the power from it. The stone of utter destruction looked, to her, like an ordinary gray stone. All the lights faded. The fairy imps fluttered quickly away into the night, and the music and magic slowly died all around her. Jasmine pocketed the round stone of her forebearers and ran back out across the sinking walkway. Somehow she knew, as if by some magic, that her youngest brother was very close by, and he needed her help. Chance, she said, somehow now remembering his name. Then, in a fleeting glimpse, it all came rushing back to her. She had two brothers and two sisters, and startlingly, they were not quintuplets as she had first believed when seeing them in that magical sinkhole mirror. Each one was 2 years apart from the next, she being the fourth child born to Mikhail Nikolaev's day. Somehow, Gilgahar's curse had faltered in this generation because the five, although living as strangers spread all across the land, were all alive, and now it was time for them to come together again as a unit against this great enemy. The horrible curse was, somehow, already broken. The fates of many sometimes intertwined together, changing what they had all anticipated were their life's purposes, she said. She ran up the hillside, feeling elated, invigorated, and strong to find Vinny first, and then onward to find Gabriel, Dedlin, and the rest of her friends. She was no longer a stone seeker. She was now a stone bearer, and it was time to fight. The end of The Stone Bearer. The next book, Dariel's Mira. Her story continues, although it is the story of her eldest brother, Legend August, and how their stories begin to entwine. If you're ready for that, I will be reading that one as well, too. And they're both available at Amazon as either a paperback book or an ebook if you'd like to have a copy. Thank you for listening.